Hey there folks, welcome back to another marvelous video. Most people who have watched the Netflix show Alice in Borderland might not know that it's adapted from the eponymous manga written by Japanese mangaka Haro Aso. The manga would receive a live-action adaptation from Netflix, which would go on to popularize the series among mainstream audiences and win critical acclaim. While the showrunners take some creative liberties with the source material, just like the manga, it presents a brutal, surreal world where survival is a game, literally, and every decision carries emotional, philosophical weight. Across both the original manga and the Netflix live-action adaptation, the story explores not only physical survival, but also the psychological aftermath of loss, the crushing weight of guilt, and the human search for meaning in the face of chaos. Despite this, they differ significantly in how they convey themes of existential dread, survivor's guilt, and the hope for redemption. These emotional undercurrents are not only shaped by character arcs and plot, but also by the storytelling strengths of each medium. In this video, we'll examine how each version navigates the landscape of Alice in Borderland and how the manga and live-action series uniquely engage the audience through their distinct approaches to tackling the profound human themes like survival, regret, and the possibility of redemption which define this series. It's gonna be a good one. But before we get into this video, we do have a very quick request. If you like the content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. So now, without wasting any more time, join us on our sojourn in the Borderland. Let the games begin. Arisu's core personality. Relatable loser versus heroic survivor. In the manga, Arisu starts off as someone who's drifting, unsure, and emotionally raw, unlike his TV series counterpart. Unlike the Arisu from the TV show, his analytical acumen is not solely attributed to being a god-tier gamer. In the manga, Arisu is extremely observant and skilled at deducing things, which leads to him having moments of insight that aid him in his journey through the Borderland. The show, on the other hand, explicitly focuses on Arisu as a gamer and doesn't really emphasize his observational side, portraying him as someone whose gaming background equips him with analytical, tactical, and planning skills. In the manga, Arisu is clearly not as mature as he's shown to be in the TV series, making him much more emotionally reactive and raw. The manga version of Arisu is, at least initially, much more selfish and overwhelmed by grief, shock, and moral dilemmas. The TV show version is infinitely more compassionate, composed, and in control of his emotions if we're to compare the two. An example of this can be seen during the Seven of Hearts game, which is even more gut-wrenching and brutal in the manga. In the TV series, during the game, Arisu runs and hides from the rest after becoming the wolf and actively tries to use the tools from the table to disarm his caller. His actions are largely motivated by his desire not only to save himself, but also his friends. However, in the manga, Arisu's thoughts move more inward, as instead of trying to figure out a way to save everyone, he tries to find a reason to justify why he should survive over the rest. He's unable to rescue or even locate Shota and Karube, and only witnesses the explosions marking their death from afar, unlike in the series. The difference in the intensity of his reaction to this, in both the manga and the TV series, highlights the psychological maturity of the two. While both of them are traumatized by the death of their friends, manga Arisu is clearly the more shattered of the two and flies into a murderous rage. In the TV show, Arisu almost immediately assumes a heroic role, especially after witnessing his friends' deaths. He actively puts himself at risk, forms alliances, and makes decisions to ensure the safety of others as well as his own safety. The manga version of Arisu eventually develops into this person. These differences can also be attributed to the age difference between the two versions. Arisu in the manga is still a high schooler, whereas in the TV show he's already in his 20s, which explains the difference in how they react to the various situations they face. We can therefore say that the manga utilizes the Borderland games to drive character development, through which we witness how Arisu becomes more compassionate, mature, and understanding, among other qualities. Meanwhile, the TV show utilizes the Borderland games as more of a spectacle, since Arisu's character in it is already quite well-rounded. As a whole, the show and manga have different goals for Arisu as a character, which explains the differences between the two versions. Usagi's backstory. Manga trauma versus show empowerment. In the manga, Usagi's backstory is built around deep grief. Her identity is shaped by her father's death and how that past both burdens and empowers her. Just like in the TV show, her father was a mountaineer and, more importantly, someone she revered greatly. We learn that he attempted an extremely hazardous climb of one of the world's most difficult mountains without supplemental oxygen using a new route. However, instead of being lauded for his feat, he's berated and maligned by his peers peers and the general public. Due to the incredible difficulty of his feat, they refuse to acknowledge its authenticity, accusing him of faking the pictures and any other evidence that he provided. Things get so bad that it escalates to their property being vandalized and her father getting harassed mercilessly. Unable to take the public shaming and social pressure, her father commits suicide, leaving a young Usagi all alone in the world. Society's disbelief doesn't just kill her father and his reputation, it also leaves a deep existential wound upon her, which completely changes how she views society thereafter. Emotionally, the trauma colors her worldview. She's cautious about relationships, carries grief, distrusts the crowd, and has moments of melancholy. Her past and her father's ghost influence many of her decisions, but she also has moments of reaching out, making connections, especially with Arisu, and helping in key games where her climbing skill or resolve make all the difference. Due to her upbringing, she's physically strong, with a mountaineering background, accustomed to nature, and skilled in climbing, perseverance, and solitude. These become part of her skill set in the Borderland. In the Netflix show, Usagi's background is delivered to us in a much more condensed and somewhat simplified manner. It's used more as a catalyst to explain her emotional and action-driven growth. Some details are preserved, while others are either trimmed or adjusted to grant her character much more agency. Much of what happens to her father is given to us through snippets delivered via flashback. Just like the manga, he's accused of fraud and public shaming follows. The emotional consequences on Usagi are immediate. She deals with shame by association, depression, and more. The show uses this to explain why she behaves the way she does. Her reluctance to trust, her reluctance to hope, and the weight of living in a kind of limbo between wanting to live up to him and being afraid of being betrayed by what people believe. While much of this is similar to the manga version, the Netflix adaptation adds many more moments where Usagi has visions or dreams of her father in the Borderland. These moments symbolically help her reconcile with her past while granting her emotional strength. All of this is elaborated on in the manga, albeit to a much lesser degree. Because of the way her backstory is adapted, Usagi in the Netflix version has more moments where she actively decides on her path. The inner conflicts she's burdened with lead her to be much more active than reactive. Her mountaineering skills, along with her physical strength, endurance, and willingness to take risks, aren't just backstory decoration, but valuable assets in the game. She doesn't just suffer in silence, she has moments where she asserts her feelings and rejects simplistic consolations, like when she rejected Arisu's comfort because it didn't align with her inner truth. She also expresses anger and sadness, which then shift into resolve. In the manga, her trauma is a lingering burden, while in the Netflix series, we get to witness how it acts as a catalyst for empowering her.
Know what I think? I think he's the Jack of Hearts.
Chishiya and side characters, psychological manipulator or pop icon. Just like the first two main characters, Chishiya and the side characters are also handled somewhat differently as well. For instance, in the manga, Chishiya is portrayed as much colder and more detached. He's a medical student whose father's expectations push him into transplant work, where he is told to prioritize only those clients considered important enough. This upbringing makes him emotionally hollow, and the manga emphasizes his moral emptiness. In the show, he remains a medical student in a similar environment, but his character and situation are far more nuanced. Rather than simply being emotionally hollow, the show highlights internal conflicts through visible moments of self-questioning and remorse. What this does is that it greatly enhances the impact of his redemption arc. The show also retains his morally gray character, but grants him a number of soft moments that make the audience think that perhaps he can change. Chishiya evolves from a character who appears purely manipulative in the manga to a more rounded one in the TV show. The show lightens his manipulation by showing his moral conflict and ultimate transformation. He becomes less of the manipulator archetype and more of a philosophical foil and a reluctant ally / potential hero. Moving on to Kuina in the manga, the focus is not overtly on the parental pressure and the gender transition, as her identity journey is implied much more implicitly. This contrasts with her depiction in the Netflix series, where her departure from home and struggles with her identity are much more foregrounded. In the show, aspects like her mother's support are greatly emphasized, and her overall character is highlighted even more. We also need to mention how Kuina's relationship with Chishiya becomes more intimate, marked by moments of shared pain. In the manga, their relationship is as real, but definitely more restrained than their TV counterparts. Generally, the side characters receive more agency and develop emotional arcs in the show. They are less supporting class with fixed paths and more co-drivers of narrative and emotional arcs. Many of the moral and psychological subtleties present in the manga regarding these characters are either trimmed or reorganized to fit the show's pacing. Some betrayals or conflicts unfold differently or are drawn out in the show compared to the manga while maintaining the same emotional beats.
The building within the time limit.
Game rules and twists, faithful adaptation, or TV-friendly action. Like most things in the series, the TV show maintains the authenticity of the original source material while making adjustments to better fit the medium it's being adapted to. In terms of the games themselves, the TV show features games that are only mentioned in the manga, along with new games exclusive to the TV adaptation. There are also discrepancies when it comes to the participants, as certain individuals who aren't present during particular games in the manga are included in the TV version. The face card games are also much more complex and intense, with rules that are harder to show without exposition. The show streamlines the games by toning down their intensity in terms of brutality and unforgiving nature, while also simplifying the puzzles by making the visuals more obvious, so that it's easier for the audience to grasp what's taking place. The TV show also features games that are predominantly replete with physical danger, making the tension and stakes more obvious. An example of this is the 3 of Clubs / Dead or Alive game. In the manga, this game is a quiz / trivia-based game with flaming arrows indicating the severity of incorrect answers. On Netflix, it becomes an escape / door choice game where choosing the wrong doors leads to instant death by laser. While the game maintains the pressure of time lost, the mechanics are changed to be more immediately visceral. To call this a faithful adaptation of the game, therefore, would be a bit of a stretch. However, this game and most of the other games are adapted in such a way to convey the subtleties present in the manga to the TV show's audience in a much more direct way. Violence and mood. Grit versus accessibility. One thing that's evident in Alice in Borderland is that it's a series that's not meant for children or the faint of heart. However, there are undoubtedly some changes that Netflix has made for several reasons, all of which we'll discuss now. Before we discuss these changes, it helps to know what amount of grit and mature content the manga delivers. The manga is full of graphic violence and gore that includes grotesque injuries and very visceral depictions of suffering and frequent character deaths. The psychological horror is also extreme, featuring trauma caused by internal breakdowns, paranoia, and despair. The games aren't just puzzles but moral traps, and they play a central role in revealing aspects like the cruelty of human nature under pressure. The manga doesn't hold its readers' hands when it comes to more gritty topics, and it doesn't shy away from exploring such things, leaving less of a safe space for the audience. The Netflix adaptation doesn't entirely remove the mature and dark elements, but there's no doubt that several changes have been made with the intention of making things more digestible and in line with a broader streaming audience. In terms of the psychological horror aspect, the TV show still does include breakdowns, but it tends to shorten or externalize them. What we mean by this is that some of the bleakest internal monologues are replaced with visual cues that soften the atmosphere of the original. On the upside, this does help the pacing of the show and keeps viewers engaged without overwhelming them. We also have to mention the difference in how suicide is handled in both versions. In the manga, suicide is given a very raw treatment, with its cause and result being shown in a very realistic and harsh way. The Netflix adaptation retains these nuances but softens them slightly, condensing the stories and imparting a more hopeful tone of resolution and redemption, which helps the audience cope emotionally. There's also a complete lack of the sexual manipulation that's present in the manga. It's practiced most notably by Shibuki on Shota to align him with herself and create discord amongst Arisu's friend group. As mentioned earlier, the reason for toning down much of this gritty and mature content is purely for accessibility reasons, in order to cater to a broader audience with varying sensibility. Kuina and LGBTQ+ representation. One of the more important side characters in the series, Kuina, is revealed to be a transgender woman who was born as a biological male. Often, queer representation in media is done in such a way to evoke humor or horror and is seldom portrayed in an empowered or even normal light. Kuina is one of the better representatives of this marginal community, as she's fierce, likable, and a total badass. Raised in a martial arts family by a father who's hell-bent on molding her into his heir, Kuina rebels at an early age when she realizes that she identifies as a woman instead of a man. Her father constantly criticizes her for her life choices, due to which she becomes incredibly distanced from him and the life he intends for her. Through all her troubles at home, the one constant pillar of support that she has is her mother, who encourages her to follow her own path. Kuina eventually decides to do just that and leaves home, following which she goes through a transition surgery and begins working at a boutique store. Part of her drive to escape the borderland is to reconnect with her mother, who's sick, so she can care for her. The Netflix adaptation maintains this storyline but allocates her more screen time to develop her identity arc. The manga and the TV show both highlight her complex character, where her identity is more than just her gender. It focuses on her martial arts, situational skills, leadership qualities, and the moral conflicts she faces. It doesn't reduce her to just another token trans character. She isn't a victim of her past or her choices. Instead, she's empowered by these things and uses them to navigate the treacherous world of Borderland. Her identity as a trans person isn't sensationalized just for virtue signaling. Instead, it's integrated into her character's motivation as to why she cares for her mother, why she fights to get out of the Borderland. Overall, the Netflix adaptation expands and makes more visible the LGBTQ+ representation in Kuina's character, giving her more agency, more screen time, and incorporating her identity into her strengths while still preserving key elements of the manga. Borderland's nature. Metaphysics versus mystery. In the manga, there are strong hints regarding the nature of the Borderlands being akin to a liminal space between life and death. It's positioned as a purgatory of sorts with metaphysical structures. It's suggested in both the manga and anime that in order to enter the Borderland, an individual's consciousness needs to have been displaced while their body remains unconscious in the real world. Normally, this state gets triggered when the person's life is under threat. We also know that such a condition can be artificially manufactured, as we saw in Season 3 with Anne's injection that stops Arisu's heart temporarily in order for him to meet the conditions to enter the Borderland. In essence, the people who enter this place are neither living nor dead, hence further reinforcing the idea that the Borderland is indeed a purgatory. On a more metaphysical level, according to the manga, different people experience the Borderland differently depending on their own nature. Some describe it as a dark place, while others describe it as a place of brightness and light, or even a womb. The games that the characters have to take part in are also not for mere spectacle and have more meaning to them than just kill or be killed. They're there to test one's will, character, and make people confront their unresolved issues. Surviving is more than avoiding death. It's, as we just mentioned, about confronting internal states, regrets, guilt, identity, and worthiness to return. We think it's safe to say that passing through the games is akin to spiritual purification. We find out that those who survive the games are offered the choice to either remain as citizens in the Borderland or return to the world of the living. This choice echoes metaphysical consequences. Staying might reflect acceptance or resignation, while returning suggests re-entry into life. That decision point underscores the metaphysical aspect of this realm. It's kind of up in the air what the Borderland really is, but we'd love to hear your opinion on it in the comments down below. Joker card and ending. Symbol versus cliffhanger. The second season of the show ends with a cliffhanger where several cards are blown off the table to reveal the Joker. This led to much speculation about the future of the Borderland. Most people anticipated that the Joker would be the next primary antagonist if there were to be a third season. There was also speculation about whether people had actually managed to leave the Borderland. We would all receive the answer to this question when the third season finally dropped. We learned that the Joker was not a single individual or even a person, but rather a concept. He's more of a concept that governs the entire Borderland. In the manga, he's depicted as a ferryman responsible for transporting the souls of the dead. In the TV show, his character isn't as literal, and while he retains the role of a psychopomp, his presence is much more ambiguous. His role is not simply limited to offering people the choice of staying or leaving the Borderland. He's shown being able to intervene in the events of the Borderland with impunity, as shown when he kills Bando despite his not having broken any rules at that moment to warrant his death. The Joker, ultimately, is both a metaphor and a mechanism. He embodies the idea that life is unpredictable and death is not the final destination. Setting and visual style. The visual style of the TV show takes a much more sensory and visually rich route. It's defined by detailed, large-scale set pieces such as the Shibuya crossing. Most of the road and ticket gate are real set pieces, but nearly everything else is CGI. While most of Tokyo in the Borderland is desolate, the show employs color, lighting, and visual effects in a more dramatic fashion. The scenes oscillate between muted tones used for empty cityscapes and the very vivid, almost surreal visuals used during the games or moments of extreme tension. Thanks to the freedom afforded by the medium itself, there's a much more dynamic approach to visual storytelling and camera work. For example, the scene where Arisu, Shora, and Karube exit the bathroom in Shibuya Station and see the empty Borderland Tokyo is filmed as a single long continuous take to emphasize the shock, transition, and the scale of the emptiness. The show also features some clever use of CGI, where the team went so far as to recreate shadows from real buildings to match the original geography and atmosphere of the location. Where the manga relies on minimalist design to evoke dread and unease, the show employs grand and elaborate set pieces combined with cutting-edge CGI to make everything feel more visceral. Considering the shift in medium, the Netflix adaptation does an excellent job of conveying the manga's atmosphere and vibe through its visuals. Critic and fan reaction. The first 2 seasons of Alice in Borderland were highly acclaimed by both fans of the manga and those being introduced to the franchise for the first time. Despite minor alterations to the original story, the Netflix adaptation mostly managed to stay true to the intentions and vibes of Haro Aso's manga. This is reflected not only in the discussions on forums regarding the show, but also in its critical scores on websites like IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. It's a widely shared sentiment that the end of Season 2 provided the perfect closure for the series, not just because all the major character arcs were neatly wrapped up, but also because there was no more source material to draw from, even if they wanted to beyond that point. It was therefore with cautious optimism that most people approached the 3rd season, as the showrunners were now creating entirely original content that had nothing to do with Aso's work. They expand on the Joker card that was teased at the end of the 2nd season by setting it up as a new threat/angle beyond what the manga explored. This was confirmed well before the show even premiered by director Shinsuke Sato, who clearly stated that the show would be moving into uncharted territory, with the mystery of the Borderland being explored even further and the rules of the world and the games becoming increasingly twisted. Some fans are glad the people behind the show are willing to take risks by diving into new material rather than trying to stretch or awkwardly rehash known manga arcs. There have, however, been detractors to the 3rd season. Usagi, in particular, is called out for making out-of-character decisions that feel forced for plot rather than who she's been before. Even Arisu doesn't escape criticism, with many saying that he's less clever and less grounded in the traits that made him appealing earlier. Some fans complain that Arisu relies more on luck and plot armor than actual problem solving. There are also complaints about the pacing and the length of the series, as it consists of only 6 episodes, which many consider too short to fully explore new characters, introduce new games, and explain the new arcs properly. This has led many to say that bringing out a 3rd season felt like an unnecessary money grab. This is reflected by the scores of critics, which dropped with Season 3, which is currently sitting at 60% on Rotten Tomatoes, notably lower than Season 1's 82% and Season 2's 91%. A common phrase is that something felt missing. Even those who liked it admit the magic of earlier seasons isn't quite as strong. Because Alice in Borderland built its reputation on a fairly tight adaptation, strong game, and psychological tension, deviating from the manga means fans are now judging both structural consistency, does the story make sense by its own rules, and fidelity, is it honoring what they loved from the source? And that's a tough position to be in for any show. Marvelous verdict! In both its manga and live-action forms, Alice in Borderland grapples with profound existential questions through the lenses of survival, regret, and redemption. However, the emotional core of each version is shaped by the strengths and limitations of its medium. The manga leans into internal complexity. Existential dread is quieter but deeper, survivor's guilt is a long introspective burden, and redemption is often incomplete or morally ambiguous. In contrast, the Netflix adaptation externalizes these themes with greater emotional immediacy. Dread is visually intense, guilt is raw and performative, and redemption is more closely tied to action, relationships, and narrative resolution. Ultimately, while both versions explore the same psychological terrain, the manga invites contemplation, while the live-action series evokes catharsis. Each tells the same story, but there's a huge contrast in the way we experience it. The contrast highlights how the medium fundamentally shapes not just how a story is told, but how deeply its themes resonate with the audience. We hope that this video brought a better understanding of the nuances that the manga and the TV series bring to the table. What's the most striking difference between the 2 versions in your opinion? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. We'd love to see them, and thanks for sticking with us right to the end of this one. Be sure to check out the rest of our channel, where we post daily videos featuring all your favorite anime, TV shows, and movies. And if you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and a subscribe to us if you haven't already. For now though, it's time for us to say goodbye. We hope to see you soon in the next one, but until then, stay safe and stay marvelous.